It's now time to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world. Well, Emmanuel Efene, the great Malabite, is not around. He's attending a function somewhere. But maybe you start with, as Efene will do it, with this newspaper.
This newspaper. I wish I could remember the exact words he's like. I know that
newspaper of record.
Of record, yes. All right. So we're channeling our inner Emmanuel Efene this morning. So let's go to the paper of record. A big one on the front page of this day newspaper. In a move that may prevent vote buying, CBN sets new withdrawal limits. We discussed this earlier this morning and just talked about the new CBN guidelines restricts individuals to 100,000 naira, corporate withdrawals to 500,000 naira weekly, daily POS withdrawal pegged at 20,000 naira, ATM 100,000 naira at weekly. Assess third-party checks above 50,000 naira not eligible for over-the-counter payment, OTC. Urges customers to use e-Naira, other digital payment channels, warns banks against policy violation with heavy sanctions to boot. Apex Bank records 8 billion naira e-Naira transactions in 1 year. Buhari seeks second term for 2 CBN deputy governors. Also above that, we see Atiku's comment on Tinubu's Chatham House appearance, comparing it only to stand-up comedy. He says he weeps for Nigeria, not APC candidates. PDP admonishes, says ex-Lagos governor advertised incapacity, inefficiency. And then just at the very top there, Tinubu, how I made my money. I am not denying my wealth. Again, we spoke about this earlier on during the news and just talked about him saying the West still uncomfortable with Buhari's reason they're not selling arms to his government. Vows Nigerians won't suffer under him because he's not the incumbent. Indeed, he said, I am Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So very different from what he said yesterday from the current president. Boasts he remains front runner for 2023 presidential run. Dr. Bati, when they asked him if he were not going to run or if he were not in the running, who would he pick out of the 2 candidates? And he said he would pick neither Peter Obi nor Waziri Atiku Abubakar. That's on this day newspaper. Let's move on to the Daily Trust. We have the Daily Trust ops. Again, the front page is on CBN limiting cash withdrawals, circulation of 500 naira, 1,000 naira notes. Individuals to access 100,000 naira per week, firms 500,000 naira. That's that. Talked about Tinubu, how I made my money. Then further down to the left, Sharia judge registrar remanded for diverting 166 million naira inheritance. Gunmen abduct 8 villagers in FCT, demand 25 million naira. Above, we have Senate moves to whittle down federal government's power to grant tax waivers. The story is on page 23 of the Daily Trust if you'd like to get details on that. Adamawa governorship, Ribadu drops legal battle against Binani. And Kwara Central, Buhari's loyalist, Saraki's associate in fierce contest. That is on the front pages of the Daily Trust. Moving away from that, the Vanguard newspaper, what do we have here? Again, still on CBN's policy, newly introduced policy to take effect on the 9th of January 2023. CBN limits cash withdrawals to 100,000 naira weekly. That's the big news there. A few pictures up just at the top. 2023 elections won't make or mar Nigeria if ... A cliffhanger there by the Sultan, CAN, SGF. You can find out the if on page 6. Massive crowd as Obi's campaign train storms Owerri. Another, just a review of Peter Obi, Labour candidates, presidential candidates campaign in Owerri, the Imo State capital. And then NBA boycotts call to bar ceremony over Olanipekun's refusal to resign. Again, that's still going on. We move on to the New Telegraph newspaper. On the front page there, we have Nigerians in the diaspora want 2023 polls stopped. They've sued Buhari INEC and they say we won't allow manipulations. Buhari assures West African elders and they say only God can decide Nigeria's fate next year, says Sultan. People in doubt of free, fair elections, says the Christian Association of Nigeria, CAN. Buhari says, I have stabilized security, diversified economy, fought corruption, says national competitiveness in global economy promising with Naseni. And then up at the very top of the New Telegraph, we have foreign airlines blocked fund in Nigeria hits $550 million, $1.1 billion in Africa. Reps appeal to IATA for understanding African airlines to post $638 million losses in 2022. And just beneath that, in Q3 2022, Nigeria's foreign trade earnings dropped to 11.5 billion naira. All right, let's move on to the Nigerian Tribune for the next one. Front pages of the Nigerian Tribune. We have there again the CBN story being front and center of the newspaper. Limits cash withdrawal, and then just also adds that 200 naira now highest ATM denomination. Effective date, like I said earlier, January 9, 2023. Now, despite the redesigning of the new notes with the 500, 200, 500, and 1,000 naira notes, it looks like the 200 naira note is going to be the most popular. So, in circulation, as ATMs would have, that would be the highest denomination that would be dispensed at the ATM come January 9. Also, FAO says 25 million Nigerians may face food crisis by August 2023. The story is on page 4 of the newspaper. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has estimated that 25.3 million Nigerians are in danger of experiencing food crisis between June and August 2023 unless urgent steps are taken to scale up and sustain livelihood and food assistance. Food crisis has been a front burner topic in recent times, and just ways to manage what could potentially be a big crisis come 2023. Muslim tickets won't work. APC has failed Northerners, says Shagari. Still internal wranglings in the APC with the Muslim ticket, and doesn't look to be coming to an end anytime soon. All right, moving on to the next paper, the Nation newspaper. Tinubu, I'm candidate to beat. That's why attacks are coming. Still on the interview with BBC Africa. Also, all set. Nigeria may lose $23 billion next year, says the National Security Advisor, NSA. Government raises special panel to check crude stealing. Sultan, CBN, again, that report, update on peaceful 2023 elections.
Okay, you left out the foreign papers just to complete what Emmanuel Efeni will have done. The Daily Telegraph of London says, ambulance unlikely. If you fall, elderly told. The various unions in the UK, in England and Wales, they're going on strike. They've declared December 21 and December 28, and that will be the largest, strike that paramedics will embark upon in 30 years. And the fear is that the elderly who fall into emergency category A and emergency category B, that is life-threatening situations. If such incidents were to occur on December 21 and 28, then there will be no ambulance, there will be no paramedics to come to their rescue. In addition to this, the Unite Union, the Rail Workers Union, called the RMT, and also, other workers within the public service sector, they are planning to go on strike to turn this December period into actually a winter, a period of discontent in the United Kingdom, specifically in England and Wales. But as Michael Wilson said earlier, it is being expected that the ministers, the relevant ministers, will still be able to work out a deal. Otherwise, a lot of people will face a lot of hardship. And then another the same story is on the front page of Times of London. The same story is on the front page of the Daily Express of London. And then, of course, the Guardian of London today has a story about the member of the House of Lords, Michelle Monet, who has now been rebuked for improper conduct, using VIP connections to get COVID contracts for, companies associated with her husband, and using an influence inappropriately. In one particular case, she got settled with about 29.3 million pounds, and the money was passed to accounts belonging, we were told, to her husband, and also trusts are associated with our family. But of course, I looked at the story and I said, well, she says she's stepping down from the House of Lords temporarily to be able to clear, her name against these wrong allegations. But look at Nigeria here. Influence peddling is a standard thing here in Nigeria. A lot of people, they are perpetually, recommending contractors to take government contracts. But in some other jurisdictions, as we have seen in the UK, that kind of conduct is not acceptable, whether you are a member of the House of Lords or you are a member of Parliament or you are a cabinet minister. So that's by way of updates.
Whether you're a member of the royal family.
Even the royal family.
No one is exempt. And it's just this thing about accountability, Dr. Bati. Yeah. In the Western world, when you're caught in such a scandal, the first thing you do whilst investigation is ongoing, even before being found guilty, is that you step away, you step aside. But we do not have that kind of culture in this part of the world, not just in Nigeria, unfortunately in other parts of Africa as well. You're under investigation. Ramaphosa, I was just talking about him yesterday of South Africa. We don't have the culture of accountability and responsibility, whereby we are caught out in what could potentially be a scandal, and because of that, we decide to own it and step aside until our name or the person's name is cleared. We just go on. There's so many people that we could mention. It's quite unfortunate. And then, going to the story around the winter of discontent, as you've put it. Quite interesting times for the UK, and unfortunately for the relatively new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, many issues to contend with and deal with. In the UK, the NHS is pivotal. They have a critical role to play, especially during winter, where we see cases, especially for the elderly, rise. And to imagine that they would be going on strike in December, and the potential loss of lives and is unimaginable. And indeed, what the Tories are pushing for Rishi Sunak to do is to pass the putting the law around restricting the extent of the effect of strikes, especially with the rail workers. Unfortunately, he hasn't yet moved as to whether he would take on this anti-labor policy or perhaps, move for pro-labor and continue to dialogue with the rail workers. We'll continue to see how that would work out.
The legislation is to say that, look, certain categories of public sector workers cannot go on strike. And that piece of legislation has been there since 2019. It was first tabled in October 2022. So the argument by the senior Tory MPs is that, look, government should move very fast, with that. It has gone through first reading, it was tabled, and that there should be second reading. But will they have enough time to do that? Finally, on the issue of the CBN's new limits, well, I've seen some people sending messages saying, we let out the fact that this may amount to a violation of the human rights of the average Nigerian to have access to whatever denomination, and that the CBN cannot say, we're going to give you only 200 naira if you go to ATMs, or that you cannot withdraw, more than 100,000 naira, otherwise you will be surcharged for withdrawing above the limit. But, okay. It's a question of human rights. Nigerians like to say, it is my money. It is my money. You cannot control how I spend my money.
That's fair enough.
But at the same time, the state also has a responsibility to worry about monetary policy, macroeconomic details, national security. Because, the CBN was also talking about checking counterfeiting, checking too much money, being kept out of the vaults of the banks and all of that. Those are, macro issues that all of us are involved in. So I don't think that it is every time that people should come around and say, it is my right, I can spend my money in the way I want, But of course, Nigerians will resist anything, particularly now that the CBN is telling the banks to be more diligent and to ask even how you want to spend your money, what you want to do with it. But if you don't have money that would attract people's attention, then of course you won't run foul of the law. But, it's just to be law-abiding.
Speaking to that, I mean, Dr. Batide said that if you're allowed once a month to go beyond the 50,000 naira for individuals and 100,000 naira for individuals, and that for organization, for firms, and in the event, in extenuating circumstances where you have to do that, number one, it must be legitimate, and it has so. The question again for the CBN is, how do you measure legitimacy? And then in order to access the extra funds, would you have to be by special order? Would you, obviously, I'm sure you'd have to go through the banks, apply for it. They have to check that the reason for you wanting to go beyond the limits is legitimate, as they've said. And how would that be measured?
Well, I mean, what the CBN governor has said is that more data will be collected. And the banks have been told, do more KYC, know your customer, ask questions. You will recall that when the CBN governor said, look, under the new dispensation, there will have to be more disclosures. And you know, they also have this new rule that they put in place with regard to money laundering,
yes,
with regard to terrorism financing, with regard to proliferation financing, you know, in support of terrorism. All of this will mean, of course, that there will be more paperwork. But what is important, as I pointed out in a previous conversation around this subject, is that we hope that these banks will not be turned into police stations, whereby when you go there, they will say, come and say what you know about this. So if the objective is financial inclusion, you know, integrity of financial institutions, all of that is in order. So those who are claiming my right, I can spend my money the way I like. No, you can't. You have to explain how you got the money. And, you know, we're operating a rules-based system. And those rules apply, not even in Nigeria, but also in other places.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we can take this morning on the newspaper review. Thanks for your, I'm sure you'd engage with us on our social media handles.